You had great initial demand for your product, so you ramped up production to build out some inventory in anticipation of continued sales growth. Except sales are flat, and now you have a ton of inventory. So you try to scale your marketing and sales only to discover that your customer acquisition costs are rising rather than declining. You also notice that the production ramp up increased your per unit cost of your product. Now, instead of making a reasonable profit, you are losing money on every unit sold. So what do you do now? In this episode, we're going to discuss the steps you will take to develop your scale hypothesis to lower costs associated with lead generation, customer acquisition, and product production and delivery. And we'll cover a whole lot more. I'm Stephen White, and this is Building Lean. Hey there, awesome founders. Welcome back once again to Building Lean, our series of workshops that cover the steps and activities your startup must take to build key business functions to sustainably generate revenues. Not only are our workshops inspired by thought leaders on startup and scale methodologies, but we also share our experience as founders, as well as working with hundreds of startups in our research, distilling the reasons why over 160 funded startups failed. And that's not all. We have Shafiq patiently waiting to join us immediately after this workshop to answer your burning startup questions related to how you can build your startup lean. If you're interested in growing your startup by building lean, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the notification bell nearby so you can receive the latest insights that will help you avoid mistakes that cost you time and money. Remember, building lean is for you, the founder, the innovator who just needs a bit of help and direction to achieve your dream. We believe in you because we know what it's like to search for help or guidance in how to start a startup. So don't hesitate to ask us a question or seek feedback from us. We'll do what we can for you as quickly as possible. And if you need a bit more dedicated one-on-one coaching, we'll work something out to get you into our incubator program. Now, let's get to why you're here. This episode continues our dive into the activities and milestones you need to complete in order to successfully achieve the first startup phase of market validation. Once again, as a quick reminder, market validation is where you prove that your startup idea is market viable, meaning that your business has the ability to attract customers, generate revenues, and deliver a quality product or service. Now, during our last episode, I covered how to identify the differentiated value that your solution will provide relative to what you promised your customers during the sales cycle of milestone number 3, as well as why differentiation is critical in separating your solution from competitors as you solve your customer's compelling problem that you found in milestone number 1. Before I introduce what we'll cover in this episode, I want to point out that by the time you approach the activities to achieve the last milestone of market validation, that's milestone number 5, you should have found a compelling problem that a common set of target customers want solved, discovered a channel to reach and engage those customers, determined the price for your product or service, and identified how your solution will deliver 10x value. Which means in this episode, we're going to dig deeper into what you need to do to determine the feasibility of scaling your startup's key business activities before attempting to scale them, as this analysis is essential when attempting to plan for automation of your lead engine, sales engine, and production and delivery engine, as well as whether your startup can sustainably grow. The last thing you'd want to occur is to commit your precious resources or spend months raising capital to only discover that your business would be unable to stay ahead of competitors and doesn't have a plan in place to grow effectively. To achieve this milestone, you'll define feasible strategies that can help you scale leads, sales, production, and delivery. This is an essential step in building a thriving, sustainable business. Otherwise, without the ability to quickly scale your business, you'll leave plenty of room open for competitors to move in, steal market share, and inhibit your startup's ability to profitably grow. Man, couldn't be more frustrating, could it? Before jumping into the process that we use to determine scale feasibility, we really like to consider alternatives to achieving each of the milestones that we've identified. So for that matter, often Shafiq and I are asked by founders who are anxious to scale their startup idea, look, why do I need to worry about scaling now? Getting funded will solve this problem. Of course, this is a logical approach, and when you think about it for a new entrepreneur, it makes a lot of sense, this was something that Shafiq and I used to think ourselves. However, what we found through experience and hard knocks is that money hides the scale challenges in the short run. Eventually, poorly conceived economics of a startup catch up in the long run. So let's look at a couple of examples of well-funded startups that encountered this issue. As an example of a startup that didn't work out how to scale before growing, let's look at Ship, which was founded in 2013 to make shipping items globally as easy as, quote, 2 taps on a smartphone. Only a few months after launch, Ship received enormous coverage, including that from the New York Times and heavy investor interest. It seemed so clear the pain points they were tackling resonated with a large audience. Kevin Gibbon, Ship's CEO, explained in his blog post outlining the closing of Ship that in his experience, Uber had transformed the way consumers thought about transportation, and that Ship thought it could do the same as he was told. And he believed it. The numbers told a story, and the founder became fixated on that story. As consumer growth slowed, Ship was unable to keep up with its own growth. Rather than readjusting its strategy from customer acquisition, Ship trudged onward. Although Gibbon did eventually take the advice to slow down growth and reorient the company, by that time it was too late. Early mistakes hindered the company's potential for a successful future, and the growth at all costs mentality eventually led to Ship's demise. Another example of a startup that didn't adequately plan scale early in the development is Sprig, which launched also in 2013 as a mobile application that enables users to find and order healthy meals and have them delivered in a minimal time frame. All the ingredients used in these meals were locally sourced, sustainable, and seasonal. But within 4 years, though, Sprig had closed its doors, proving that on-demand food delivery is a tough business, even when you raise $57 million. So, what went wrong with Sprig? First off, its business model was a direct-to-consumer delivery model. It had to figure out how to produce at scale and decrease product unit costs. Unfortunately, Sprig never figured out how to lower its unit delivery costs. It tried partnering with the big boys, but could never lower delivery costs below an individual meal cost. Wow, I mean, just think about this. This meant half of its costs went to meal production and half of it went to meal delivery. Sprig's CEO, Gagan Bayani, explained, quote, "The complexity of owning meal production through delivery at scale was a challenge." A VC with August Capital commented on the reason behind the unsustainable business model by saying, quote, "It has become obvious that you can't make money on individual deliveries. The cost of a single meal is too low to hide your associated fees. Who wants to subsidize a company with no path to profitability?" The food delivery business has yet still to prove itself to be sustainable, with competitors like Munchery, Zesty, and Postmates all struggling. When it comes to determining your startup idea's scale feasibility, you need to have a plan in place to measure whether you're on track with hitting your goal. As we previously mentioned, we use a technique called OKR, which stands for Objective and Key Results. And it's a framework for setting and measuring goals as well as the results of the activities to achieve them. For this 5th milestone of scale feasibility determined, we've designed a 7-day OKR that keeps you focused on completing the activities necessary to finish this milestone within 1 week. The key results correspond directly with your progress on the underlying work plan. So let's review what your execution cycle should be. Since we've already done all the hard work by building a project guide, I'll use this as a reference point for this episode. Now, the key aspect is, as you begin each activity, you need to plan your work so it can be completed in manageable, bite-sized chunks. This prevents the feeling of being overwhelmed in the work ahead or discouraged when you encounter a small setback. Once you've made your activity plan, then using the framework, tools, process guides that I'm about to cover, you'll work on each activity in an orderly manner which will keep you focused and on target. After completing all the activities for a given milestone, you need to schedule time to review your results with an advisor. Your advisor can help you with a fresh pair of eyes to quickly analyze if you have correctly determined whether your startup can feasibly scale its key business activities or not. In this last step of your execution cycle, you need to evaluate whether your idea suffers from a fatal flaw related to your scale assumption. If you have advisors who are well versed in lean methodologies, then they should be able to help you perform this analysis. Now, once again, if not, don't worry, you can contact myself or Shafiq to help you out with that. Okay, now that you understand how to proceed using a project guide, let's look quickly at the detailed activities for market validation's 5th milestone, scale feasibility determined. Oh, I almost forgot one thing. Once you achieve this last market validation milestone, you'll be ready to move to the second startup development phase of repeatable sales and delivery because you'll be confident that you have a business that can efficiently scale. To successfully achieve the scale feasibility determined milestone, you'll complete the following 5 activities. So let's look at each of these activities in detail. You'll begin by identifying additional channels to reach your early adopters and early majority customers beyond the initial channel you discovered in developing your manual lead engine. Possibilities can include channels that you developed using third-party tools such as YouTube or a blog, as well as traditional pay media channels. After ideating on additional channels to reach your target customers, you'll determine the approximate cost of accessing customers in those channels to understand the feasibility of each one. When considering the feasibility of scaling your sales channel, you'll examine alternatives related to how you'll convert qualified leads into sales. At this point, you've only guaranteed pre-orders through manual sales. When you scale your sales process, you'll need to be able to answer your customers' questions related to the buyer's journey in a way that is efficient for them and provides confidence that your product or service will deliver on the promised value. For a B2B startup, this means hiring a traveling salesperson who can come directly to your customer. Alternatively, you may build a sales support team that provides 24/7 live chat capability on your website to answer prospective buyer concerns. While at this point you've only built and field tested a functional prototype of your product or service, you'll consider where scale efficiency exists related to producing and delivering your solution faster as well as cheaper. This optimization process is necessary to know that your solution's gross margins will grow as you sell and produce more. The key activities of your business are primarily related to your operations and R&D. Depending on how you deliver your solution as well as the customers you serve, your key activities will focus on engaging your customers, ensuring that your product or service solves their compelling problem, and validating that your customers are delighted by your solution. You'll need to estimate the cost of growing and maintain these key activities, as these costs will be reflected in capital assets and human labor. Now, for each of these activities, I want you to remember one thing. You are not actually testing your scale plan during this milestone. Instead, you're simply documenting your scale assumptions and performing a basic analysis to determine the feasibility of those assumptions. That's why there's a 7-day time frame to achieve this milestone. Now, before moving to the next startup development phase of repeatable sales and delivery, you'll first analyze the results from your activities for this milestone. To assess your progress to achieve this milestone success criteria, you'll need to answer the following questions. Is your lead scaling feasibility determined? Is your sales scaling feasibility determined? Is your product production and delivery scaling feasibility determined? If you've answered yes to each of these 3 questions, then you'll have completed the first startup development phase of market validation. Pretty awesome. And you can be confident that you have a business with the potential to sustainably thrive. Since this is a simple analysis, it'll take about 1 week to complete this last milestone. But there is one other thing. By achieving market validation, you'll be ready to raise a seed round or skip a capital raise and head straight into the second startup development phase of repeatable sales and delivery. Now, that's great. However, you need to know what to do if you answer no to any of these preceding questions. The last fatal flaw that you need to overcome is when your business is just too difficult to grow, which means you must perform your fatal flaw analysis. This is a very real problem that founders overlook today due to the proliferation of options to automate their business functions, along with reduced logistics costs if you want to outsource production of a physical product. While those advancements are ones we all benefit from, it also reduces competitive barriers that previously protected businesses. An example of how a business can be too difficult to grow can be witnessed by more and more founders incorporating personalized concierge services into their solutions. Managing bespoke experiences being delivered by thousands or millions of providers, like in the case of Uber, Airbnb, Fiverr, or Instacart, can create complexity that makes a successful startup struggle to have a breakout. In some cases, startups plateau due to their success performing the key activities that were needed to get started, and now those same activities are not easily translatable when the company scales to reach new markets and offer new solutions. When this fatal flaw appears, it's due to one of 5 causes. So let's begin by looking at each one in order. The first cause can be tested if you have no identified method for reducing your cost of acquiring new customer leads. The cause of which is due to channel costs not decreasing with volume, and you have no working hypothesis to determine how you make this happen. When this occurs, your corrective actions are: number 1, Identify methods for developing your own channel that lower your cost per lead as you scale your customer lead volume. Number 2, you may need to change your target by focusing on the next customer segment that you'd previously documented. This will enable you to see if that segment has better potential for reducing costs with volume. Before moving to the next test condition and cause, I want to mix things up a little bit and dive directly into an example of why this test condition matters. Revision Optics designed, manufactured, and delivered implantable products for the treatment of presbyopia. In particular, Revision offers Presbylens corneal inlay, a refractive surgery solution to correct vision lost by the natural aging process called presbyopia. The company's primary channel is through ophthalmology professionals. Reaching eye doctors to deal with a known and common eye disease would seem like an easy channel to build. So what went wrong for Revision? In the words of Revision CEO John Kilcoyne, the presbyopia segment is, quote, very challenging. While Revision had a terrific product, Revision ended up shutting down because, according to their own CEO, the company could just not get the business to grow fast enough. The business would have needed significantly more capital than the $172 million previously raised just to achieve positive cash flow, and its investors were reluctant to put more money in. Think about that. Over $170 million, and the investors decided that they'd rather stop wasting money than trying to recover a portion of their investment. For those of you who don't have previous startup experience, this is a fairly common circumstance, which is why you must realize that while investors may be accustomed to taking risks, they won't take stupid risks. If you have any doubts, watch a couple of episodes of Shark Tank to see what I mean. Now, the corneal inlays that Revision developed may yet find their place in ophthalmologist business models, but as of now, they require more time and effort in practice than either refractive or cataract surgery, which typically involve the operation itself and one follow-up visit. Only after failing did Revision recognize that ophthalmology eye surgeons do not want to keep seeing their patients. They want to fix them and move on. What that means is Revision had 3 problems that they never worked out up front. Number 1, how to grow traffic to their existing set of ophthalmologic surgeons by maximizing their existing channel. Number 2, how to get those surgeons to want to see the same patient multiple times when the surgeon's habits were quite different, thus maximizing sales conversions and end user satisfaction. And number 3, how to add more surgeons given the first 2 issues when Revision needed to grow their channel. By not recognizing this flaw during the market validation phase, Revision carried this flaw with them for a number of years. The lesson learned, once again, is that you can quickly gain lots of traction, but in the long run, you simply cannot live with flat or growing costs for generating qualified leads. You must identify and work out a method for lowering your costs over time for finding new customers. You don't want to follow Revision's path in costing their investors $172 million and over 20 years of effort by the founders and countless others before their eventual demise. The second cause for this fatal flaw has to do with the cost of acquiring a new customer. Your CAC, or customer acquisition cost, is the money you'll spend to convert your leads into sales. Once you have a lead, you have to take extra actions to convert that lead into a closed sale. If you have no working hypothesis regarding how you'll reduce these costs with volume, then you'll suffer from this fatal flaw. Think of this as a situation where it costs you $1.50 to close each customer sale and you only generate $1 in revenue each sale. You're literally bleeding out because you're losing money on each sale. Founders often fool themselves into accepting this risk up front, believing that volume will drive down those costs, especially if their startup is being valued based on customer volume and not profitability. The reality when this occurs is that you're in trouble and you need to take one of the following corrective actions. Number 1, you should explore pivoting to an alternative business model that can reduce your selling costs, such as when a B2B startup sells through a self-serve model instead of face-to-face sales. Number 2, you may consider sales channel partners as an option as you can share sales costs in pursuing complementary customers. Remember SHIP from earlier in the episode? The lessons learned from SHIP is that you don't want to become hyper-focused on vanity metrics, as you must act quickly when you recognize a fatal flaw and pivot early if needed. So what went wrong for a seemingly slam dunk success? The cost of acquiring a new customer for Ship was way too high when compared to the lifetime value of each customer. Ship didn't realize this fatal flaw until way too late. Their hypothesized customer lifetime value just never materialized relative to their projections. Remember, that's projections. See, they never tested it along the way. By the time Ship realized this, it was too late to overcome its failure. During market validation, you will not have the data necessary to know definitively if you have a development problem, which is why you must develop the habit to constantly track your CAC, your customer acquisition costs, and continually assess it against customer lifetime value to ensure the ratios you built into your financial model are still holding up. This is why this fatal flaw analysis is not just a one-time activity. It's something you'll repeat as you progress into other phases of your startup development, all the way up through scale into your regular operations when you become a going concern. This must be part of your business DNA. It's your job as a founder to ensure your business is not being cornered into a death spiral by developing one of the fatal flaws because you neglected to regularly prioritize this analysis. And of course, no episode would be complete if I didn't get a chance to once again fawn over Elon Musk. In this case, in the case of Tesla, this is a contrary example of a successful scale strategy where the startup was able to consistently lower its customer acquisition costs. On average, an automaker spends billions of dollars each year to generate leads for its dealer network to actually sell their cars. And we know from industry data that dealers average 20% margins on the sale of every automobile. So from a value perspective, the auto manufacturer is spending 20% of the final sales price of every automobile on customer acquisition costs through its dealer network. On the other hand, Tesla spends $0 on marketing and $0 on customer acquisition costs, and that is due to word of mouth promotion by their loyal customer base to create awareness of the product. Unsurprisingly, there are dozens of channels on YouTube dedicated to covering Tesla and their cars as well as their energy products. And if that wasn't enough, Tesla built a self-service sales model so you can order the car completely online within 5 minutes and completely avoid the hassle of negotiating with a salesperson. The third cause for this fatal flaw deals with production costs. If your product unit costs are not able to decrease as you build product production volume, you'll be unable to scale your business. While this seems unlikely to occur, if you have highly manual or high-touch processes built into your production to deliver your customer solution, you'll easily encounter a struggle where your profit margins remain flat as you miss the benefits of the volume-related cost reductions. In this case, your customer may love the custom touches, but will become disappointed in your ability to sustain them. So fortunately, you do have a couple of options for your corrective actions. Number one, you may want to redesign your solution to better benefit from automation options during production. Number two, you can identify and qualify an outsourced production manufacturing partner where you'll benefit from labor cost arbitrage by locating your production in a lower cost geography. An underappreciated risk that comes with outsourcing, though, is that you need to be confident that delays due to logistics or differences in time zone won't negatively impact your ability to fulfill customer demand. So let's see what happens when a startup's production plan doesn't actually scale. Founded in 2014, PepperTap was created with a mission to revolutionize grocery shopping as an Indian grocery delivery service with minimal charges. The mobile-first company operated with a 100% no inventory model. Pretty interesting. What did they do? They partnered with local grocery stores, which made it particularly easy for geographic expansion. Once again, great concept. So what went wrong? PepperTap had assumed it'd be able to lower unit costs per delivery as volume expanded. They never worked out how this would actually happen. I mean, think about this for a moment. How can you scale product picking, bagging, and delivery when the actual inventory is on local store shelves? By constructing a model that could never lower product unit costs, PepperTap boxed itself into a death spiral of draining cash with no hope of profitability, even though it had raised over $50 million. By the way, this is why Amazon in their beginning never thought about partnering with local stores for fulfillment. There was no way to reduce delivery costs out in the field. However, a centralized warehouse, while capital intensive to build, can enable a startup to do things dramatically different. One thing you need to recognize about the PepperTap founders, as soon as they realized that they would be unable to overcome this fatal flaw, they returned a large portion of their investors' money back to them rather than stubbornly forging ahead. The founders were able to maintain a good reputation so that they could have another try at their next startup. It's how you behave when you fail that is just as important as how you behave when you succeed. Now, the lesson learned here is that you need to prioritize making your business model sustainable over breakneck customer acquisition. Also, know when to close shop before someone does it to you. Another aspect of determining your scale feasibility related to your solution is connected to actual delivery of your product or service. As you've seen with each test condition related to the fifth fatal flaw, you're testing whether your product delivery costs will decrease with additional volume. When these costs don't scale due to its costly nature to deliver each unit, it's likely due to owning the logistics process end-to-end up front. During market validation, you want to be high touch with your customers, including personally delivering your service. For example, Travis Kalanick and his co-founders were the first drivers of Uber. In those early days, when you used the original Uber cab service in San Francisco, it was highly likely that Uber's management team picked you up in their own car. However, that obviously wouldn't be sustainable, which is why they developed a business model predicated on leveraging excess capacity from individuals who wanted to pick up a side hustle. When you encounter this issue, you have a couple of corrective actions. Number one, you can develop your own logistics marketplace for those who like to deliver your product or service as a certified contractor. Keep in mind, this is a complex process that can take away your focus from your primary solution offering, which means that the second corrective action may work best for most founders. So speaking of which, number two, identify and qualify an existing logistics partner that will handle your solution delivery. This step is best when the last mile of cost delivery is the hardest to reduce. Many retailers turn to the ease of Amazon's fulfillment services for this very reason, because Amazon's scale provides an immediate delivery cost reduction when compared to most independent small businesses. So now let's look at an example of a company that didn't work out product delivery issues prior to scaling. As I discussed up front with Sprig and the challenges of scaling food delivery, the lesson learned here is that by building a delivery model that didn't scale for small orders, which is what a majority of customers wanted, Sprig had doomed itself from the beginning. Once again, you could look at Amazon to understand why it chose to get into the delivery business fairly quickly in its scale cycle. Amazon's management team knew that they had to significantly lower the unit costs on item delivery for it to be able to successfully scale. Luckily for Amazon, it avoided dealing with the complexity of perishable items early, or they too might never have taken off. And this is likely why Amazon has been methodical in determining what changes it'll make with Whole Foods in the years after its acquisition. The last test condition you'll evaluate is whether you can reduce the cost of key activities when determining your scale feasibility. Since I've spent quite a bit of time discussing milestone number 5, I want to remind you one thing that should have come through during the case studies. All of this fatal flaw analysis is occurring during market validation, which means you're in a short cycle of developing workable, scalable hypotheses for when you'll eventually begin to scale during the third startup development phase of sustainable growth. You're not taking any action to scale itself, but you need to be prepared, which is what these other companies have failed to do. Now, returning to reducing your key activity costs. You need to understand what key activities are. Key activities for a thriving business include new product development, support, HR, finance, and many other operational activities depending on the type of product you have. A good way to think about key activities are those things that are essential to sustain and grow your business. The two corrective actions you can take if you haven't been able to identify how you'll reduce these costs will be: number one, you can identify and qualify a partner to outsource non-scalable activities that are non-core to your business. An example of this could be procurement or HR and payroll. Number two, you may want to determine the feasibility to spin off a new venture to perform a key activity when the market does not have a strong player that can meet your outsourcing business needs. Once again, Amazon is a perfect example of this. No one else was capable of providing the dynamic cloud computing capabilities Amazon needed to maintain its own e-commerce site. Once Amazon built that for their own needs and recognized how others needed it too, Amazon began to offer its Amazon Web Services, or AWS, to other businesses, which enabled Amazon to grow its capacity further while reducing its key activity costs. So let's look at one last example of a company that wasn't as savvy as Amazon and failed to overcome fatal flaw number 5. Now, not to be confused with the social media platform of TikTok that is so popular with today's youth, Yik Yak launched in 2013 and quickly raised $73 million as it took college campuses by storm as an anonymous chat app. Valued at over $400 million at its peak, Yik Yak was unable to keep up with students as another competitor, Snapchat, also took off. Now wait, we've all seen instances where 2 or 3 strong competitors exist to serve a target market, right? I mean, if that's true, so what went wrong for Yik Yak? Its service never designed in safeguards to prevent users from abusing each other. Plagued by cyberbullies, threats, and cruel content, Yik Yak was eventually banned from some universities. Yik Yak's management team didn't want to spend money on resources to curate the community built using their tool. By not understanding the new problem it was creating, along with its inability to pivot to group messaging, Yik Yak was unable to maintain its buzzworthy quality. Within 3 years, app downloads had declined by 76% year over year. And 1 year later, Yik Yak closed its doors. The lesson learned is that understanding your key activities is essential to ensuring you're building a business that will scale. Yik Yak's failure to identify curation as a key activity meant they never even saw the problem coming, which meant that they behaved like a happy dinosaur, ignoring the giant meteor about to hit. Okay, this wraps up the 5 milestones of market validation, which means that during our next episode, we're moving into the second startup phase of repeatable sales and delivery as we examine the first milestone for that phase, where you'll develop your automated lead engine so you can more efficiently grow your channel and convert more prospects to qualified leads faster. We'll also identify the activities you need to perform and the tools you'll use so you can efficiently complete this milestone and stay ahead of competitors. Now, before we jump over to Shafiq to answer your questions, if you're looking to change how you grow your startup by building lean and you find these workshops helpful, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click the notification button, as well as give us a like or drop a positive comment. Also, if you know other founders or product managers who could benefit from our workshops, please share this video with them so they too can build their startups lean and avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Building Lean is brought to you by the Lean Master Incubator. Unlike other incubators or accelerators that rush you to pitch to investors whether you're ready or not, Lean Mastery guides you in building key business functions that turn up revenues fast, which puts you in the best position to successfully raise money and outrun your competition. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you for watching, and remember, don't let anyone knock you off from achieving your dream, as we believe you could do it, and we're here with you every step along the way. So let's continue building lean by jumping over to Shafiq to get us started with answering your burning startup questions.
Hi everyone, Shafiq here. Welcome to another edition of Founders Forum, where we answer questions submitted by founders and innovators like yourself. But before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel somewhere over here, as well as click on the notification bell so you can gain immediate access to the latest episodes of our show, where we help founders by answering critical questions related to systematically building your startup. All right. Hey, Steven, are you ready with our first question?
Hey there, Shafiq. I do have our first question right here, and this question comes from a serial entrepreneur who's working on his 4th startup. Now, this founder is returning back to startups after a stint in enterprise, and so this is his first startup in 10 years. As his startup is in the market validation phase, in the middle of market validation, he writes, "I get the importance of planning how I may scale my startup while I'm in the market validation phase. What I don't quite understand is this just a paper activity where I'm supposed to capture my scale ideas, or is there more work to do beyond that? Also, what do I do with these scale ideas? Just leave them to the side until it's time to scale, or is there more to it?"
Okay, so developing a scale hypothesis is an essential part of market validation. And why is that? Well, without your ability to grow fast, you as a startup are just going to get overrun by competition. So by being able to grow fast and outrun the competition, you can gain substantial footing in the marketplace. So In the market validation, you must be convinced that it is possible to scale using an existing proven model. For example, if you're building a SaaS offering targeted at enterprise, you know you can scale the offering because you've chosen the underlying cloud infrastructure as well as a database infrastructure that will allow you to scale the number of users without degradation in response times. Now, you know this because there are numerous existing SaaS vendors who provide similar complexity of software using the same underlying technology. So you know that you can scale the delivery of service, but you plan to grow using a sales team. And so it's great that you got the delivery part figured out. Now you got to figure out also the sales side and so on. And if you plan to grow using a sales team, and as you develop your hypothesis, you notice that most SaaS vendors have utilized a consumer sales model. So, in a consumer sales model, the employee can sign up for the service similar to yours using a credit card. And during your market validation, you notice that many IT managers made it especially difficult to get through a technical evaluation. So, whereas when project managers sign up directly, they just start using your solution without getting any approvals. So your original hypothesis needs to change. Since the market is telling you that your solution will not scale cost effectively using a sales force, and more importantly, the IT guys are going to slow you down. So to truly scale fast, you need to build a self-serve sales model. Similarly, you will need to figure out how to scale your lead engine. In all cases, your hypotheses are first validated against existing industry practices, and next, once you know you can scale using an existing model, your next challenge is to figure out how to innovate the scale model. You will accomplish this in the repeated sales and delivery phase, where you will use the approach of making the scale version first work, then improve to decrease the time, and then finally the cost. It is during the repeated sales and delivery phase when you validate and improve upon your scale thesis. Once you have validation, you're also figuring out the key metrics that will help you constantly improve the lead to adoption time. In other words, from the time you get a lead to the time when the product is adopted by your customer, while also decreasing the costs that it takes from the lead to get adoption. So the faster you can sell and deliver, the more competitive you become. Now, there's another book, by the way, I'd like to point out. It's called Blitzscaling, and in it, Reid Hoffman does a terrific job outlining some of the scale strategies. And I highly recommend everyone who's thinking about how to scale their business to read Reid's book. But remember, here you're just developing hypotheses. You're not actually executing. There'll be plenty of time later on during repeated sales and delivery when you get to figure those things out, and it's more important that you run fast than worry about cost. Stephen, would you like to add anything to this?
You've covered this pretty clearly. Simply enough, we're a startup in the market validation phase. As you said, the process of determining the feasibility of your scale hypothesis is essentially documenting the resources and methods previously developed by other businesses. Founders just need to think about this as an open book test. So you should leverage the ideas and strategies that worked, which does require some research. Blitzscaling is a great reference point. There's some great suggestions in there. And then from that, a founder needs to perform some preliminary analysis related to cost and effort so they understand what's involved to execute their scale plan when it's time. Now, when a startup is in that second development phase of repeatable sales and delivery, that is when validation of the scale plan will occur. And the main reason why you do that is you test out your hypothesis prior to executing it, which the execution portion comes out during the sustainable growth phase. All right, on to our second question. And this one comes from an unusual source, Shafiq. This question comes from a strategy consultant with one of the big four firms. And she writes, I was recently working on a proposal for an existing client related to a new service offering. The client asked our team to provide more detail on this new service, how our service works, and what their experience would be should they accept our proposal. It just so happens my husband has been watching your Building Lean shows, and he recommended that I use the buyer's journey flow to structure our presentation. I watched the episode where you covered this, and it makes sense. So, getting to her question. I'm curious, how did you come up with the buyer's journey and why does it work? I haven't seen this in any of my MBA classes, and our firm has never used this approach.
Okay, so the buyer's journey is derived from the book, The New Solution Selling by Keith Eads. In the book, Keith refers to the work salespeople have to do to manage their buyer. Now, Keith wrote the book at a time when face-to-face selling sales were the norm for complex enterprise products. Since then, many Silicon Valley companies have innovated by moving away from complex sales scenarios and turning their product into more of a self-serve transaction. So Steve and my contribution to the original work was to present the concepts from the buyer's perspective rather than the salesperson's perspective. We wanted you as the product manager to put yourself in the buyer's shoes so that you could design a lead engine and a sales engine that would help you lead your buyers through the buying cycle without, and without understanding the buyer's journey, you cannot compete in the marketplace where your competitors are able to outsell you. Now, our buyer's journey is intended, for most first-time purchases of new product. It is not intended to describe the everyday purchases of known products. Also, we assume a rational buyer. We believe by assuming a rational buyer, you will design much superior products. There are many people on the internet who will preach all kinds of gimmicks that make buyer take actions by taking advantage of the buyers, by taking advantage of the buyer. And then these tricks rely on the buyer not having enough time or their fear of missing out, as well as the impulsivity of the buyers. We think these gimmicks are shortcuts that keep you from making your product great and want you to avoid them at all costs. Now, if you make a B2B product of any substantial cost, then you will most certainly face a rational buying process. In which case, you're going to be well prepared. But it's also true for B2C products. Remember, there are always thought leaders in every product category that look at your product from a rational buying perspective. And getting bad reviews from known experts in the field, and you will have lost the opportunity to become the market leader. So it makes sense to follow the rational purchasing process. Steven, can you add some of your thoughts on this?
I think the most important part of what you said is that the buyer's journey reflects the buyer's point of view. And this is really intentional, as it's far too easy for an entrepreneur, product manager, innovator, or in the case of this question, a consultant, to lose the customer's perspective. And if you think about it, as consumers ourselves, we expect products and services to be designed around our own needs. So why should that change when we develop solutions for others? Okay, here's our last question, Shafiq, and it comes from a first-time founder whose startup idea is an industrial product for the chemical industry. Oh, and this startup is also in the market validation phase. This founder writes, I noticed that many Silicon Valley startups have customer acquisition costs that are essentially zero. When developing your scale thesis, how do you establish, as a founder, do you establish the goals for reducing the time spent and then reducing the costs?
Okay, so goals are one of those things that are always tough. So when establishing goals, remember, it's not a leap to the top, but reasonable steps that you can implement fast that help you drive down the time and then the cost, because we're talking about scale here. So remember, it's first time, then cost. So as far as time, it depends on the product. For example, if you have a food product, then you want at least 50% adoption on first taste. Sampling is the fastest method for getting buyers through the buyer's journey. So you eliminate all the risk and they know what it'll taste like. So you want to make it count. That is why adoption rates of 50% or above are necessary to keep selling costs low enough. So your job is to improve the product fast enough so that your adoption rates are at least 50% the first time somebody tastes it in your target market segment. Similarly, for software products, to gain adoption, you want a minimum of everyday usage. Otherwise, there's a strong possibility of your users simply forgetting about your solution. So how fast you get users using your product every day is your goal. And that could be within 1 day from sign up or 7 days. The point is to keep improving the time it takes to get adoption into the shortest time possible. Also, for cost metric, you want your overall customer acquisition cost to go to as close to zero as possible. Now, it's not always possible, but your job is to innovate your way to reducing these costs. Now, Steven, I noticed you have a little different way of looking at it. Do you want to share your thoughts on this?
I do, but I want to mention a couple things first. First off, I love these questions. These are great, and it really speaks to our hearts. Our goal is to really democratize the process of building a startup because we believe that you founders absolutely can get there. You just need some help, maybe some encouragement, some guidance, some direction, and that's what we're really focused on. Now, the other thing is, for those of you who've been watching our Q&A for a while, you may have already picked up on this, but we like to know the startup phase a founder is going through when answering their question. What this does is this enables us to tailor our answers and then not guide someone into taking inappropriate actions that are either too advanced or too basic for their circumstances. So in this case, for a founder who's just in the market validation phase, they can benefit from being able to look a bit ahead and plant some seeds that they can cultivate later. They can only do this so long as they maintain focus on the immediate tasks at hand. Let's not freelance and start doing things out of order. We can just plan ahead. So what can they do? Well, all founders can reduce their customer acquisition costs through the use of earned media. So you may be wondering, what is earned media? Earned media comprises publicity for your business as well as ratings and reviews or word of mouth from customers. This is where the concept of virality comes from. And earned media is in contrast to paid media, which comes from advertising and sponsorships, or owned media, which would be marketing materials, press releases, blogs, or YouTube channels. Now, it's easiest to generate earned media when you're a disruptor in your industry and you're willing to offer yourself as a credible news source to journalists. Now, here's the thing. This isn't always easy or sustainable. So most startups focus on generating earned media through word of mouth customer referrals. So to do this effectively, your product design needs to plan and account for network effects to make it easy for your customers to talk to their peers about your product. With software, designing for network effects is easy, but for physical products, a startup needs to plan a bit more. So recently, I've noticed that most products that I bought on Amazon have the network effect designed in, and I'm talking about physical products here. So usually it's a simple card that's at the top of the package when opening it. On one side, there'll be a message thanking me for the purchase and asking for a recommendation, a favorable review, or even offering a discount for a repeat purchase or customer referral. Now, that's not where it stops. On the other side of the card will be instructions to quickly receive help if something is wrong with the product, or if I have a question, or if there's a warranty issue. Pretty smart, in a pretty tight package and a small card that sticks out right away. And when I think about it, I'm sure a similar plan could be developed for an industrial product, especially for a startup in the market validation phase. Even if it's the founder personally calling the buyer a week after product delivery to check on the customer satisfaction. Okay, that's all the time we have for questions right now. If you're looking to build your startup lean, please click the link nearby or drop your question in the comments below. Also, please subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell button so you can receive immediate access to our latest episodes. Building Lean is brought to you by Lean Mastery Incubator. Unlike other incubators or accelerators that rush you to pitch to investors whether you're ready or not, Lean Mastery guides you in building key business functions that turn up revenues fast, which puts you in the best position to successfully raise money and outrun your competition. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you all for watching, and we look forward to helping you be successful in pursuing your startup dreams by building lean.